Morning, everyone. My name is Stoy Hall. I'm the host of The Faces. Entrepreneurs are people. Today, I have with me a really cool guest, Stoy Hall. He's coming at us from the financial space. I'm looking forward to telling you more about him. But of course, like I always do, my goal is to outsource things. So who's better to tell you about Stoy than Stoy? So Stoy, introduce yourself, man.
I appreciate it, and we might be cousins, right? We might be related some down the no, I really do appreciate the opportunity to tell my story, but to speak more specifically about our industry and why I'm different. Why I think that it all should be different in itself. I've been in the financial planning industry for 13 years now, and it really started back when I was a kid. I grew up with a dad who wasn't around, a mom who worked 12-hour shifts, raised by my grandparents, raised by my friends' families, and just kind of like out and about always. And it was good and bad, right? There's always good and bad. Yeah. It was really good because I was able to learn different types of parenting and have different experiences and different cultural things. Whereas it kind of sucked because I never had the core family, right? The American mom, dad, wake up on Christmas type of situation. But it drove me to figure out why that was the case. And the why was because money, like ultimately, it all stemmed around money. My mom worked 12-hour shifts so that way she could have money to pay for my sports, and her love language was giving gifts so that way she could buy me whatever I wanted. My dad wasn't involved because of my mother, but that has nothing to do with money per se. And then growing up, I just recognized that, hey, I have friends that parents are well off. I have friends that parents aren't well off. And how? Like, why are everyone well off, right? Like growing up, why doesn't everyone have money? This doesn't make any sense. And so throughout, my childhood and then getting into Drake University, where I played football and got my degree in finance, I worked at the Boys and Girls Club off campus for 4.5 years. And that's where it kind of like then clicked. And it all came down to financial literacy, which I've transitioned to using the term financial education. People just didn't know what they didn't know. Ultimately, right? Just don't know the terms. We don't know how to save money. We were never taught it. Money is the one conversation that no one has. Like they're very uncomfortable talking about their money, how much they have, how much they make, how much debt they are. And I always joke about this but people will talk about their lawsuits that they're in, or their medical history that they just went through. That will blast everywhere, but their money. The money's something that people think they can control, and they can't. And so early on, I recognized this, and I wanted to help. I've always been, as an athlete, I've always been around being the captain, the leader. I want my team to succeed over my own individualism. And that just kept conspiring and doing the same thing over and over again until eventually I got into this career where you can do a lot of different things. I started in the insurance realm, selling life insurance like a lot of us do. Quickly recognize that's not cool or fun. Everyone needs life insurance. Let's be real, but
not sexy, right?
No,
but
not sexy at all. Everyone needs it, but there's a right way to do so. In there, I learned, hey, the plan, like someone's actual financial plan, one is as unique as a fingerprint to them, and two, dictates what you do. Some people that means life insurance first. Some people that means just figuring out how much money goes in and out of their bank account. We're all different, right? You got to start somewhere. And so I helped start a firm out here in Iowa with my guys out of Houston. They are now Centric Advisors. I officially launched Black Mammoth in 2020 with the design of being a modern family office where we take these traditional family office mindsets and views and concepts that the ultra wealthy have, right? Because ultra wealthy don't do things by themselves, by the way. They have teams that take care of them.
Correct.
They delegate, right? To attest to what you talk about. And I wanted it to monetize, right? I want to be able to do that for the everyday business owner. And so we launched Black Mammoth, and that's what we do. Primarily focus on women and minority business owners, just because that's me and that's my wheelhouse.
Of course.
And we're loud about it.
No. Hey, wow. got a lot I want to pull back there. For one, I think we may be related because I was also raised by my grandmother and passed around. Wasn't out of not of love. I was passed around to people who loved me, right?
Right.
It just wasn't my parents. And and that's a whole nother tangent. But it's interesting that you found yourself in a position to provide value to folks that served a similar path as you. And that's important. I mean, what a motivator. I find that in people like my wife that do the same thing. She had a background as me, immigrated to the United States, right? And everyone's like, you're not going to make it, right? And then she, got into a place where now her primary focus is to help people who go through the same thing she went through. So, great way to pull you out there, man. I'd like to, get to, before the Drake, like where'd you find yourself originally? I mean, when you were a kid, right? Me, personally, I would sit there, I'm like, I will not be poor, right? I refuse. Cause I'm sitting around here, I'm like, we're going to the gas station. I put $5 in, right? Like, what's for dinner tonight? What was last night? And I was sitting there, I'm like, man, I hate this, right? And so I will never be this. And one of the delineations between poor and broke was brought up by Dave Chappelle when he was making a joke about his dad saying, he's like, I hate being poor. He's like, we are not poor. Poor is a mindset. We are broke. So I came from that poor background and lifted my way up. But what was your point where you're like, I don't want this life. Like I want something else.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know what triggered it per se, but just growing up, I know that I wanted to be able to live life's experiences. For me, it wasn't about the tangible things. I still rarely buy myself things. If I do, it's like I buy meat or I buy food or we go on trips because I want the experience, and that's more like the memory creation is better for me than having a tangible item. But I recognize I want to be able to do that. Right. I want to be able to take my mom on a trip, or I want to be able to go to the beach if I wanted to. Right. Without having that credit card debt, $5 of gas, having that weigh you down. But I just wanted to do it differently because I felt like some type of mindset was off. Right. If other people are doing it, then you should be able to do it. What is truly stopping my parents from doing so? Or my family in general from, leveling up. And it has everything to do with mindset, right? I speak about money mindset almost every episode that I have on my own podcast. It is the most vital thing there is. And I didn't know at that time, that's what the hell I was trying to figure out. But now, reflecting back, it was all how do I get the mindset changed? Because money can bring people so depressive and so hyper focused on a dollar, as opposed to if you focus on the joy, the memories, etc., the money will come. Your focus is different.
You're talking about the value that money can provide. And, I stopped looking at success as a dollar amount, and I started looking at freedom. What am I buying with my money? And, it's something I talk to a lot of my clients about, because when people want services, they're always like, well, how much am I going to spend? And I'm like, that's important, right? Budget is important. Understanding where you are is important, but also understanding what are you getting from it, right? And so you can have all the money in the world, right? And live a very poor existence. I like to always highlight the Kennedys, for example, right? The Kennedys, they have the highest suicide rate and, the old money families, right? And they have all the money in the world. So you're asking yourself, why do they have those problems? Their value, their struggles that are caused by those things, they're different than someone who doesn't have money, right? They do say it's better to cry in a Lamborghini than in a Honda. However, at the same time, crying's crying. That's an interesting piece you put there. So when you do start working with people and you're looking at your own experiences, your background, how do you advise them that direction? You're like, hey, listen, I get it. You want to save this amount of money. Hey, just by the way, when you get here, doesn't mean you're rich now, right? It's just we're trying to get you to the starting point. How are those conversations going with your clients?
Yeah, we don't talk about money. We really don't talk about the money side of it, the numbers of it. We literally, my first question to them is, what's your first money memory? It's the first thing you remember about money.
Okay.
Where? For us, everyone's going to be a childhood thing, right? Because you're first when you're young. But there's something in your childhood that actually has taught you about money your entire life, like has driven your relationship with money even as an adult. And you got to recognize that, because we've been taught, whether that's the media, society, our own parents, depending on your parents, that money first, like money drives everything. And that's actually the opposite thing. You should drive money. Money is just the tool for you to achieve whatever you want to achieve, not the only focus you should have. And so we talk about that first. Like that's first and foremost what we talk about, and get them on the right mindset and goals of what is for them, not what society tells them, right? Not you're supposed to have $2.4 million at retirement, or you need to go to school, get married, have a kid, get a job. Like we don't have to do these things in any order. It's dependent on how and what you want to do. And usually that is like our first few meetings. Obviously I have to collect documents and get the numbers, but it's really about the first few hours of just figuring out. And I tell this to them too, I'm going to break you down to the point of tears potentially. And that happens a lot, to where you're going to want to hate me. And that is on purpose, because I need you to take that weight of the money and all of that relationship with money and put it onto me. You need someone to blame in order for you to change. And so I say, hey, blame me. That's fine. That's fine. Eventually we're going to teach you, but blame me up front. Use me as the scapegoat. Every conversation you're having with your spouse or your loved ones or your business, whatever, say, Stoy said, no, can't do that. Right? Until we can get you to where that is comfortable in a conversation you can have, and then you can take that weight back. But it allows them that freedom that you talked about to make the change. And that is one of the hardest things in our world to do, is to make change about money.
It's such, you're like the moon for your clients. You're taking all the asteroids. I like it. Yeah. It's an interesting mentality, because some days you don't think about the money. I felt more wealthy when I had less money than I do now. And I always say this thing is, who's poorer? Is it the man on the corner with no overhead, right? Who's generally going to get what he needs? He'll probably be there tomorrow, right? And so he's surviving. Or is it the person with all the mortgages and all the cars and is paying for everything? Like, if I lose my job, right? We're a single income family, right? If I lose thing, and like I'm very financially prepared, right? You should not worry about me, Stoy. But I'm very smart with my money. But I used to think before I wasn't smart with my money, I was like, okay, well, what happens? Like, what happens if I lose all this? And I used to think like, man, I'm more stressed than this guy, right? And I'm always worried about everything. And so I wish I had someone to blame. I used to always blame myself, and so I used to always be worried about myself. That's great. And so when you look at yourself, you got this business, you built it, you brought yourself into this world where you're able to apply your journey to others and kind of help them find that freedom, right? And so who are you outside of that? Like, you played football, went to Drake. Like, who's Stoy when he's not a financial advisor? Let's peel off that layer, throw that suit in the closet for a second.
Yeah, which is awesome, because I've had that suit off for a few years now. I'm the same person. I don't change. I really don't. I have the same conversations. I'm still supporting others. I'm a foodie, so I love food, and I usually speak more about food, but ultimately I'm just the normal person. I still golf. I still hang out with my kids. I still hang out with my friends. Like, Stoy is the guy who's going to be there to have your back no matter what the situation is, which is the exact same person I am in my business. Like, there really is no difference. And I believe that, because that mindset has to be that way, in my opinion, as a business owner, a professional, whatever you want to be. Just be you. You're going to attract people who want to work with that person or want to be around that person. If you're fake in each one, you're going to have fake people around you. And as we've all learned from all of the situations that have happened in our generation, fake people you don't have time for. You can't have time for people that are fake, because you don't have the energy. You're only allowed so much brain energy and emotional energy every day. why waste it on people that aren't aligned with, your thoughts and your beliefs?
No, yeah, I mean, and that comes down to the size of your circle. I would definitely equate that my friends, and this disclaimer, no one's died in these comments, but I come from a Marine background, and the best way to describe friends like me is like, you just tell me where I need to be with a shovel in the lime, and
Right.
I'll be there. Right? You need bail money, like I'm your guy. Like for those that are in my circle, like that small group, I'm there for. I mean, that's good, and you said it well. Being fake, like if you are one person at work and then you're one person at home, then who are you? Right? How do you keep up with that? I've been there before. I'm like, all right, well, I got this mask. I'm going to the office, right? I was like, man, if people saw me outside of work, they think I'm crazy, right? And now, of course, years later, I'm the Cody you get regardless of the time of the day, which is healthy for us, right? Not being able to have to remind yourself, like, okay, who am I in this circle, right? I'm like, who am I here? So you don't find, like, one of the biggest things I love to highlight here is, like, we have our faces. Like, you have a face, right? You're Stoy, right? And so do you find that who you are on both sides complements both your existence?
I do now. It took me, oh man, I don't even know when that full transition happened. It might have been in the last 4 years. It took me a very long time, because you got to think about it. I live in the Midwest. I'm a mixed, light-skinned black guy, right? And for those that don't know, when you're light-skinned, which is a term that is used specifically predominantly in the black community, if you're light-skinned, they think you as a white person. A white person sees you as a black person. So you are in this weird situation where both sides don't truly welcome you 100% because you are not one of them. And yeah, I'm bringing race into it because it's true. Like, growing up, this is how I
what it
lived.
is.
So I had to be a chameleon. I literally was friends with every group possible, from the goths to obviously the jocks and everyone in between, only simply because I wanted to feel like I needed to be a part of something, right? Never felt like I was a part of a group. Obviously, I was an athlete and had my team and my brothers and always that. But outside of that, there wasn't, I had to figure that out. And that went throughout my career, right? You start getting into the money situation, you have to wear suits, you have to talk a certain way, you have scripts you're supposed to follow. You only can meet with certain people who have a certain amount of assets, like all of these things that this industry loves to tell us to do. And it, again, puts you in this mold. If you Google the financial advisor, what do they wear and look like what that is. And so it took me a very long time to get through that and to recognize, like, hey, no, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do what they all say. You don't have to follow this line. Just be yourself. Because if you be yourself, then you actually get to work with clients that are like you, or like you as a person, which is a different way to run a business or to have clients, and having someone who's a client who judges you based upon all of those items I just listed. And so I recognize that when I then launched Black Mammoth, I only took those clients with me, right? I only took the ones that liked me for me and are part of my family. And then it doesn't feel like a job. Then it doesn't feel like business. You're literally just out there helping people, and they're helping you. And that ultimately is what we want to do as humans. We want community. We want the village. We want to help people. It is literally in our blood to do so. But you have to be focused on the people, not the money.
Yeah. And, I want to take it back to the point you hit there with, navigating the world of race, categorized as light-skinned, right? And that's one thing that my wife, when I first met her, had no clue she was Mexican. All right. Thought she was just tan. Right. And so, disclaimer, right? Yeah. And of course, when she spoke, I knew she was a Latina of some sort. But one thing that she always expressed is the discrimination she gets from her own people because she's light skinned. And so they refer to her as Caucasian, right? She's like, well, I'm Latin, but I'm Caucasian because I don't look like 80% of the Mexicans, right? Because half of the area she comes from in Mexico has some people that came from Europe 300 years ago, and now it's all
Right.
mixed together, and she's light skinned, right? And so, she, where there are times we go out to breakfast or dinner, and they're knows for Latino, and she'll start speaking Spanish to them, and they're like, "Oh, wow, I thought you were a gringa," right? And so, and how, one thing that, and I want to get your opinion on this since you brought it up, is one thing I've always noticed, whether it's an Asian culture, Indian culture, Middle Eastern culture, put in the culture, right? It seems that they elevate light skinned, right? Bali, for example. Look, you think of like Bollywood actors, like you don't think of the 1 billion people that are represented by India. No, you don't, right? You think of Bollywood actors, right? Yeah. And so, even, when you look at, and there's more diversification now in the popular music scene of, light skinned and dark skinned women. However, there are these light skinned women that, pop to the top. So, give me your thought process on like that particular piece there. Like, why is that? Like, why is this? I mean, and be honest with me. I don't really care what gets said on this, but why is that? Like, why do you get shunned by one part of air? Because I've heard it before, right? And then some people are like, oh, you know what? Hey, you know what? You're kind of like us, right? And so, what is that?
Yeah. Well, from the darker side, the 100%ers, right, if you will, from the dark side, their perspective is Caucasians have run the world. Well, specifically in America, obviously, because of slavery, etc. But around the world, globally, Caucasians are usually the ones that take over, plumage, do things, start war, etc. Mm-hmm. Typically, that is the white people, right? But they're the dominant ones. They have all the money. They have everything. They don't have issues. They don't go through the things that any minority goes through. Is in general what the conversation is. So when you are lighter skinned in that Black community, they feel as if you get all that privilege because you are one of them. You are white. You are lighter, so you get other privileges that don't come from a darker skinned person. Flip side of that, all the whites are like, hey, you're not dark, but you're closer related to us. So you're kind of cool because then we can say, hey, I got a Black friend, right? I've got this friend. I can welcome them in and I'm helping the minorities, right? Yeah. Because it's a closer representation of who they are. And so you get that. And luckily, I would say over the last 2 decades, obviously the world and specifically America is getting more melted, and eventually light skins will rule the world because duh. But ultimately it comes down to the fact that both sides see you in a different light for no different reason of, hey, you have privilege, or hey, I want to help out the underprivileged, and you're the middle ground. I can help.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I've lived in Asia and Central America, the United States. And one thing I've always noticed, regardless of where you go, is, birds of a feather flock together. Right. And, I'll speak to my time in Mexico, and, disclaimer, I'm obviously not Mexican. Right. But I will say I lived there for right. Wow. No, tell me more. But I lived there, and hey, listen, Mexicans be very racist, right? Go to Asia, like Asians can be very racist. Oftentimes you want to be like, oh, it's against, African Americans or Black skinned or white skinned Caucasians. You could say it could be, but sometimes the thing that they're most racist against is the ones that are nearest to them, right? Asians love attacking the Filipinos, right? Yep. And the South Americans, they attack, they hate Argentinians for their own reasons, Salvadorians for their own reasons. You're like, whoa, right? And so I always thought that was interesting, but it was just something that when you talk to like being the melting aspect, right? And eventually, started off as a soup, went to a salad, and eventually everybody is going to be mixed in some respect. Now, I am 96% Irish, right? I thought I was cooler in some respect. I thought I had something. I tell my wife all the time, I have like 1% Spanish and Portuguese in me. I'm like, I'm Latino. All right. I'm Latino. But, I always find that interesting because one thing that I was painfully aware of, and it was brought to my attention because I grew up in the Southeast, right? And then I joined which mostly white people where I live. And so I grew up in the trailer park. So I was in a different ghetto. but it was all white people. And then I go into the Marine Corps, who is at large representation of the United States population, a lot of white people, right? And then I moved to California, right, and start exploring the world. And someone I was with at that time, an ex of mine, was like, well, you have it easy. Like when you walk into a room, you're 6'2" and white, you instantly have everyone's respect. And I'm like, no. And I'm like, well, yeah. And then over time, I started realizing, like, oh, I can walk into any room, and if I'm well dressed, right, and I walk in, I tower above most people, right, and clean cut and shaven. Like, oh, well, this guy must be in charge. And I realized, I'm like, oh shit, she's right. I was like, and then I'm aware of that now, and I always, I mean, you get the cards you're dealt, right? You can like things, you cannot like things, but I think that it's one thing that you brought up is just, painfully obvious, is that regardless of where you sit on the race spectrum, you have to deal with it, right? And you unfortunately have to deal with the middle, right? So I'm sure you said 100%ers, and I almost spilled my coffee. And so I was like, well, I've never heard that, but like, it would be easier to be on one end of the spectrum, right? Because you're like, I'm definitively here, therefore I can look that direction, right? Versus you're like, hey, my black side, hey, oh, hey, both of you looking at me like, not one of us. And so that's difficult, but so I appreciate your honesty there. That was just a highlight that I want to bring up. And the other part that stuck out was when you're talking about not talking about finances. Like, we don't talk about money, right? And that's, of all the things we get taught, right? Please, can some president pass an executive order, right, with 3 swipes of the pen and 2 lines of sentences, right? Instead of teaching me 2 years of Spanish, which I didn't remember India. I didn't learn Spanish when I went to Mexico, right? Yeah, right. Like, you should get 4 stages of finance in high school. Don't teach me 2 years of foreign language that I'm not going to remember. Teach me how to, like, what is a 401k, right? And like, is it for me? Like, and what is, how is mortgage compounded interest over my lifetime? Why does that 0.1% matter, right? Teach them things about numbers, because we don't talk about it. And we just, they say don't talk about sex, politics, and money. Those are my 3 favorite topics, right? Like, make things awkward, right? So, like, what would, if I were to bestow upon you right now, the head of the government, how would you go about and to say, hey, listen, we need to start teaching people about X things, because that's what I'm seeing people struggle with the most when trying to plan the basics.
Transparency would be the thing between everything, like not one industry or another. How it all works, truly how it all works. The reason the money system is taught or not taught, depending what side you're on, the way it's taught or not taught is simply because of control, power and control. Corporations, corporate in general, is designed around power and control. Like, ultimately, that's what it's for. Wrapped up into leverage. If you want to use leverage as the term instead of power and control, that's fine. But the wealthiest people in the world do 2 things in leverage. They leverage other people's money, right? Banks and institutions, and they leverage people, human capital, so that they can work for them, right? I'm going to pay you a little bit. You're going to make me more. I make more. I created you a job. You're going to stay here. I'm going to take care of you, right? That is how the money game in its simplest form works. Is I need to leverage other people's money. I need to leverage people in order for me to make more money. Well, isn't that just power and control? Don't I have now power and control over you, Cody? If I pay you well enough for you to stick around. I treat you good enough for you to do your job. But at the end of the day, what you're doing for me, return value, is something that you can't actually scale, or you can't even fathom the return on it, because I need you in order to build my wealth. You need me in order just to survive. It's a different mindset. And so it's taught incorrectly on purpose for the power control and to have enough humans to leverage in order for the ones that understand the game to keep getting ahead. So one, I would say the transparency of every industry, because in my position as running a family office for my clients, My job is to vet out everything in everybody that comes into their life. Think of me as like head of security, if you will, for a little bit. I use quarterback term a lot, but like head of security a little bit, because I vet out everybody, every relationship, every contract, everything that's going on. And you start to figure out that there's a lack of transparency in everything that we all do, either on purpose, right? Because I want to hide something to just have you sign the contract, make me money, or just subconsciously it happens accidentally because of the way we've been taught is not to be fully transparent and trust people. And so that's what I would do. There are a lot more other things I would do, but in terms of teaching people, it'd be the transparency of whatever thing that they're getting involved with, but specifically the money game.
Yeah. And I think it's a systematic, we talk about the public education system, right? What does that prepare you for? It tells like, oh, what did your counselor tell you could be when you grow up, right? No one ever said I could run my own company, right? No one ever said I could be a day trader. Like I day trade, right? Yeah. These are things that, the people who do it and do it well, right? Being an ADHDer myself, right? I find that day trading is a very great game for me because I'm doing 1,000 things at once, which is something they always said was my downside. And, that I agree with you. The first thing that dictators do oftentimes is limit information, right? Stifle education and teach what they want with the propaganda that they want. And I find that little piece of capitalism, right, is our bit of propaganda, right? Let's educate people enough to do what we need them to do, but not enough to be informed about what it is we're doing, right? And so you gotta keep the rich rich. And then I'm not talking about those who fluctuate through society, right? There are those like us who started with this much, right? And we got to where we are because we took a look at the game and we're like, I feel like something's up here and I'm going to try to game it myself and then make your way up. But then there's just those who, influence the entire system, right? And they don't want the system to change because, the cog in the system is that money and that capital, right? The human and the green. So, I completely agree with you.
You brought up a really fun point. So I made this statement and I don't exactly remember the exact tweet, but I had a tweet go viral within my community because I said that, one, I don't believe in the accredited investor rule. I think it should be kaput. I think if you have been educated enough, you should be able to make whatever investment decisions you want for yourself, as opposed to an SEC rule that literally states, nope, sorry, you're not worth $1 million and you don't make over $200,000. So you can't actually invest in all the things that the wealthy are investing in because you're not worthy enough, right?
Yeah.
And we got into this back and forth argument because I said, well, if we do our jobs and educate them, then they should be able to do so. And their thought and behind the SEC rule and the reason it was made is because those that don't know what they're doing, kind of like in day trading, right? If you don't know what you're doing, you could lose it all. You could lose everything you have. So we're going to control their ability to do so until they reach this number figure, this fictitious number figure. Mm-hmm. And my argument was like, it should be based on education, whether they have to pass an exam or they have to have a planner, an advisor on staff or hired to do these things, but something needs to be done. So that way the general public, everybody should know how these investments work. And if they want to participate and throw in $10,000, they can do so. Right. And we went back and forth a lot. And I've got called names from CFPs before about it, because again, it comes down to control. And what you were talking about with the information thing is my industry does it a lot. We're only going to give you so much information. So that way you have to hire us in order for you to be welcomed or to have all of these things.
Gotta stay relevant.
I'm like, here, take it all. Like, you don't need to hire me. No, you literally can do it yourself. The problem with that is I do it every day, all day long, and the money game is very complex. So at some point you're going to want some help, and I'm here for it. But like, that's that same thing. And I just wanted to bring up the point that inside of our industry, we are still fighting about those things today because it is still prevalent about the control and capitalism.
Yeah, and that comes back to the thing, like, you educate everybody, and then you start talking about, well, what's the relevance? Like, where's my relevance? Where am I? Like, if everyone had the gist of what I know, and most people don't need a whole lot of information, maybe some people are a little bit more complicated, complex, but I think that's the biggest piece is some people are afraid to educate those and guide those beyond their relevance. And so I say that when in employment all the time. I've replaced myself a couple times before where I've brought on a mentee and then they become independent. Like, oh my goodness, imagine that. I trained someone to a point where they didn't need me anymore. Shame on me. Right. Some people see that as a bad thing. And at first I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. Like, this person doesn't need me anymore. And then they've gone on to do my job. And then I get the opportunity to do something different. Right. And then, I tell people all the time is racing cars is easy when you go straight. The experience comes when you hit the turns. And that's where you are. You're the turn master, right? People can invest all day when the market's going up. Like, you can buy all day when the market's going up. But example tonight, when Ukraine fires long-range U.S. missiles into Russia, what are you going to do, right? Market just went down 60 points this morning. What are you going to do, right? And so I was up at 5 a.m. figuring out what was I going to do, right? Because I was going up, right? But also I hedge, so I knew something could always happen. And your people's hedge, your people's Wikipedia or AI, right? For like, oh crap, I don't know what to do anymore. Stoy, great information. I really want to provide this last minute here to before we transition into close, to just really have you plug yourself. I'm all about the plug. I'm here to talk to cool people and drink coffee, right? And I want to give you the opportunity to, say your piece, call your advertisement. So that, like, why do people need Stoy Hall? When should they come to you? And give me that 2 minutes there, man.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Well, one, everyone needs a financial planner, and I don't really care who you choose overall. I've got a lot of great resources of my own colleagues. Ultimately, if you have a question and you're wanting to know your situation, I want you to reach out. Here to help. Specifically, if you're a business owner and you're like, I have 1,000 hats I'm wearing, which we all do, and it's draining and you don't know where to go, it's exactly what Black Mammoth's for. That is what our team does, is it takes all those hats off so you can wear the couple that you really love. And hopefully that is to be the leading part of your family and to lead your business, whether that's in sales or operations, I don't care. But we're going to take all that weight off your shoulders so you can live a joyful life ultimately. And my only ask for everyone is, between whether it's this podcast, my own podcast at No BS Wealth, or in general on social media, because I'm literally everywhere, is you got to communicate, whether that's a DM, a comment, a like, a share, whatever. And it's not because of the algorithm. I know Cody doesn't really care about that either. We want to help you. The only way we can help you is if you talk to us, right? Our job's not to call you. I'm not going to get the whole phone book and do the whole thing that they used to do in the insurance business and just call everyone A through Z. I need you to reach out, and we need to have an open communication. And so your first thing to do, if you're listening, take that first step and just communicate, whether that's a comment, a DM, free phone call, whatever it is. That's my only ask ever on podcasts, is that you just reach out. We can't help you if you don't talk to us.
No, thank you, Stoy. Everyone, this is Stoy Hall, CEO of Black Mammoth Financial Advising. Thank you all for joining us today. Like he said, communicate. I say that to people all the time on my introductory video when I talk to you in life, right? If you have feedback, drop in the comments. If you want to be up to date with more people like Stoy, follow him, find him on LinkedIn and social media. Same here. If you've enjoyed this, like and follow. If you didn't, don't like and don't follow. That's fine by me. I'm the CEO of Telehelping, a virtual staffing organization, and that's going to pay my bills and pay for this podcast. However, this is fun too. So again, I want to thank you, Stoy. I appreciate you taking time this morning to join me.
Thank you. No problem. Hey, and if anyone's out there and wants to see if we're connected, go ahead. Google search. Surprise us. Find out for extra related.
Yeah, I'm not going to do 23andMe. I'm not having them map me or anything, but I don't know. We're both pretty handsome. So, hey, everyone, thank you so much for joining. Signing off. Be well.
This video was brought to you by our official sponsor, Telehelping. Need support for your business? Telehelping connects you with top-tier remote staff to help you streamline operations and fuel growth. Go to telehelping.com and get started today.